Sarah Morse is a US citizen living in Scotland. Last year she was sacked simply for expressing her opinion on abortion. And Sarah joins me now. Sarah, thank you for joining me. So last November, you were engaged as a cover teacher at Arbroath High School when you answered a pupil's question. And that led to a chain of events. Can you explain what happened?
Sure. Doing substitute work or cover work, as soon as I open my mouth, all the students are really interested because clearly I'm an American, right? And they tend to ask me all kinds of different questions. Do I eat brisket? You know, have I eaten Arby's? Do you really get to wear your own clothes at school? You know, what's the school system like? And this, that, the other. You know, does everybody have lockers at school? You know. And I usually, almost always, take a few minutes at the beginning because they don't know me and I don't know them. And I answer their questions, and they're like really, really interested and fascinated, generally speaking. And I was doing the same thing with this class. These were older kids. They were S3s. And I hear from one corner of the room, well, what do you think about abortion? And I thought for a second, and I said, well, as a faithful Roman Catholic, I don't support it. I don't agree with it, I think is my exact words.
Which is a very short, very factual answer.
Yes, I was just answering a question. You know, there was no persuasion involved. There was no elaboration involved. And the girls in one corner kind of groaned, and they said, well, what about in the case of rape? And I said, well, actually, in the case of rape as well, because I don't think it's right to punish, you know, an innocent child for the bad things that their parents did.
Again, a very, very short and a very factual response.
And a very reasonable. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wouldn't think that they would want that kind of thing to happen also. And then we went on to other subjects, right? And in between each of these, they were literally peppering me with all these different questions. And once they realized that I would, you know, give an opinion on more controversial things, they asked me about a lot of other things. I haven't lived in the country, in the U.S. for over 20 years, so I don't really keep up with a lot of things that are going on. You know, half the stories in the newspapers, in the U.S. newspapers, I have no idea who they're talking about anymore. But I would just give short, succinct, answers to their questions, in between saying, okay, let's get on with your history now. Okay, and let's, you've already had your work, let's get on with your work, let's quiet down, and this, that, the other. And then the class went on through, and a couple hours later, because I had another couple of classes to cover, towards the end of the day, the last class, I got an email from the finance minister of the school saying, can you please, stop by, I have a few things I need to talk to you about. And just that morning, I had agreed to a contract to do more work for the school up until like the 18th of December, to Christmas time. And
this was mid-November?
Yes, it was the 19th, because I remember specifically. And I thought I was going to be getting, the packet, guidelines and, the hierarchy, who is who, and extension numbers, so if I needed to call somebody, and fire procedures, all that kind of thing. And I went into the finance manager's office, and she sacked me. She fired me right there on the spot. She says, I'm going to have to let you go. And she says, I was supposed to work the next day even. And she says, and when I said why, I was like really shocked,
And what answer were you given?
Well, her exact words were, because you were talking about your religion and abortion. And I pushed back and saying I was only answering a question that they had solicited. I had not said anything about any of that beforehand. I was talking about Arby's, beef and cheddar sandwiches, and all of a sudden, abortion gets, shot over the bow.
And where did the head teacher of the school come into this process?
I have no idea. I do not know who she is. I wouldn't be able to pick her out of a police lineup. I was never introduced to her. I didn't even know her name until I looked it up on the internet.
And was there any reference made to the head teacher?
Oh, yes. In fact, it was the teacher, the head teacher apparently had told the finance manager to get rid of me. And when I pushed back a little bit, the finance manager just kind of shook her head and said, well, she's just not having it.
So this was the head teacher deciding that you cannot answer questions on religion or on abortion. No conversation, no process, no investigation, simply
nothing.
A decision on the spot immediately.
Yes, and I left, and that was it. I was not asked what happened. Nobody asked me to write down what happened. Nobody, there was not any, well, you need to go talk to so-and-so and then talk to so-and-so and then talk to so. There was no process whatsoever.
So you were offered no opportunity to have a conversation or a discussion and no prospect of any kind of appeal or reassessment?
Absolutely not. I was just out of there. And I'd not been given any guidelines about what I should be talking about or should not be talking about in school. These were older kids. It was a subject that they had brought up themselves. I'm actually not that political, and I don't try to persuade people to do anything. In fact, at one point, once they pushed back about the rape, I said, but I know it's a hard issue, and it's okay if you disagree. Yeah. I made it very clear that this was just a quick answer to what they said, and I gave them a reason why I had my answer, which was because I'm a faithful Roman Catholic. In fact, I kind of patted myself on the back, thinking, "Oh gosh, I've got an opportunity to teach them something about the Roman Catholic Church." Well, clearly that was not acceptable.
No. So how shocked did you feel as presumably you got up from that meeting and walked out of the door for the last time?
Yeah, and no one has ever contacted me or said anything about it, not either from Angus Council or from the school. I was very upset. I mean, I've only ever been fired once, and that was my first job at 16. And it's quite humiliating, and it's degrading, and particularly to be such an extreme reaction to what I had said, which was really a very neutral thing to say, to get the kids to stop asking questions and get on with their work.
You must have felt traumatized.
I was shaking. I was shaking as I left. And in fact, as I was driving home, I had to pull over on the side because I was thinking, okay, maybe I shouldn't be driving in this condition. And I kind of calmed myself down for a few minutes, called some friends, and wound up going home. And to be honest with you, I've been offered other cover jobs afterwards, and I've said no, thank you. In fact, I had agreed to one job in the town where I live, which is not in the Arbroath area, and I wound up canceling that because I just felt kind of sick to my stomach with the idea of going into another school. I mean,
so you've now had a few months to think about this, to reflect on it. I know you made a point of writing down very carefully a record of what had happened, the conversations and the discussions, and you clearly have reflected on it. And having done that, do you think that anything you said was political, controversial, unacceptable, any of the things?
No, I don't. I mean, if I had gone on to try to persuade them to agree with me, or if I had inappropriately told them how abortion is actually done, how horrific it is, if I had told them, well, that after, the day after pill, it can actually be reversed, right? which might be a little bit of information a young woman might want to know that is not advertised much.
Or even if you'd gone on to criticise their opinions,
right,
which you didn't do.
No, not at
Quite
all.
the opposite.
Yeah, I said it was fine for them to disagree. And, I'm not a huge campaigner. I'm not a protester. I'm not an agitator. I'm not politically active outside of voting for elections.
You were effectively cancelled on the spot.
Yes.
You
Yes.
were silenced and you were cancelled.
Yes.
Immediately.
Yeah.
What freedoms of yours do you think have been breached by this?
Well, my freedom of expression, free speech, for a start. In fact, I have found documents that relate to England and Wales. I haven't found anything in Scotland that actually encourage political discussions in class, as long as they're even, and both sides or three sides or all sides are spoken about. And in fact, when I taught in Canada, one of the units that I had designed, schemes of work that I had designed, were roundtable discussions of political issues, of which abortion was one of them. And I was, I told the principal what I was going to do, and he said, that's fine. I told other teachers, they said that was fine. And so, in my experience, it was okay to talk about such things, particularly with older kids, older women in particular, who may find themselves in trouble at some point. And we'll have to do that. And I was clearly discriminated against because of my religion and my view on abortion.
So it sounds as if it was a complete infringement of your various rights: freedom of speech, freedom of expression,
yes,
freedom of conscience, freedom of religion.
Yes.
All of which apply in Scotland because the UK is a signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights. So that applies in Scotland as much as in England and Wales. So they should all be respected, all of those rights. And it does appear from everything you've said that none of those rights were respected.
None.
What does your experience tell you then about how cancel culture works?
It's shocking in a way. My story is small. It was short. I don't teach for a living anymore. I'm kind of on the far end of my career. I do it because I enjoy it. And if I were a younger person who relied on my regular income for my living, it would just be absolutely devastating. Not just emotionally, like it has been to me, but in general, and to their life.
And what does it tell us about the wider culture in perhaps not just that one school, but in local authorities and in government and in institutions across the country? That a head teacher, for example, can just say, we're not having any of this, we don't accept it, and out you go. There's no due process.
No, absolutely none. And I think part of that is because I don't know exactly what the legal framework that I operate under as a substitute teacher or as a cover teacher, but we are clearly, I don't want to say garbage, but we are clearly at the bottom of the list of concerns.
And do we know if any other cover teachers have been treated like this in that particular area?
I don't. To be honest with you, I don't know. But I will say, as a cover teacher, the kids and the management, we definitely get the more difficult treatment.
Yeah.
The kids are downright abusive, and in fact, one of the reasons. I was really disappointed because being sacked in this instance also ended a verbal contract that I had agreed to earlier that day. So not only was I losing work that they had promised me in the future, and emotionally kind of wrecked me, to be honest with you, but this school, the kids are wonderful. I mean, I've taught in 3 different countries, and this school in all of the island of Britain has been by far the best behaved student body I have ever come across. And I was really looking forward to and was eager to engender a good relationship, because as a substitute teacher in this country, it's all about the relationship that you have with the school. If somebody knows you, or you're a friend of a friend of a friend of somebody at the school, then you're much more likely to get jobs. And I mean, this is the first school I've worked at in Angus. I've worked in several schools in Dundee, because I'm on the list in Dundee. But this is the first school in 3 years in Angus that I've ever had, been invited and accepted for a job, because nobody knows who I am. I'm a total stranger.
So having had those rights infringed, having had that treatment, what action now can you take, or what action are you taking to seek compensation of some kind for the treatment you've experienced?
Yeah, well, at this point, I've engaged a barrister, and he's advising me. I've contacted ACAS and filled out their forms and started the process with ACAS, which is like a mediation organization, I guess, between the parties. I'm waiting to hear back now. I've been assigned a mediator, and I've spoken with him, and his job now is to go speak with the other parties and get their story and, maybe come to some kind of agreement about things.
And I'm right in saying SPUC have offered to help you with this process,
yes,
and
they
also
have.
to bring this story and to bring your experience to a wider audience.
Indeed. I mean, people need to know what's going on. I mean, I'm sure if this had happened to me, I'm sure many people would just kind of keep it inside and just try to put one foot in front of the other, especially if they were in a different stage of their life.
Well, in
right?
many ways, that's how this cancel culture works, because what it does is intimidates people into silence.
It's harassment, just plain and simple. They want you to be quiet. And I mean, people of more or less conservative, I mean, I don't really have an ideology, because I take issues one by one, and form an opinion. I don't join the group think kind of thing. But they are some of the most intolerant people in the Western world these days, and yet their big thing is tolerance.
Yes, it's the irony, and it's the height of hypocrisy, really, that what they preach is not what they practice.
It's crazy. My mother grew up on the Murray Coast, and all through my childhood, it was like, oh, Britain is so wonderful. They are so tolerant. They are so non-racist. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, right? During the 60s and 70s, when there was still residual, well, maybe not so residual racism. So my mother really emphasized how absolutely wonderful, free, and tolerant Britain was. It's part of what made me come here and bring my, at the time, 12-year-old son, because I wanted him to grow up in that kind of environment. And it's a total shock. It's a pity.
Yeah.
I mean, Scotland should be ashamed that things have changed so much that you can get fired for what I did. For
answering a question. Have you been given any idea of what the timescale will be for the ACAS process to complete?
I don't know. I filed my complaint well within the time frame that they needed. I'm waiting to hear back from my mediator now. I don't know what's happening. In fact, I will email him tomorrow, because he's told me to. And I do wonder if the school and the council, because I filed 2 complaints for each of those, because I'm not even entirely sure who I am legally employed by because of this kind of weird amorphous substrate that I kind of live in as a cover teacher rather than a regular contracted teacher. But I do wonder if they're just choosing not to respond, to like pull it out and thinking that I'm just going to give up. well, I'm effectively retired now because I don't want to work in the schools here anymore. If kids don't abuse you, then clearly the management will abuse you. So it's like I've got all the time in the world, you know. And
so you have no intention of
I have no
giving up.
intention of letting it go. I will take it to a tribunal, and if I haven't looked into it, but if I need to take it to the HCSR, I just might endeavor to do that, you know.
Well, we would be very, very interested to hear the progress of the case. We hope it has a successful outcome and that you get the compensation that you deserve. But in the meantime, Sarah, for sharing your story with us, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for listening. Appreciate it.